And what if the Second World War didn't end with Germany's surrender, but with its victory? Imagine the Führer won, Europe under the Reich, America in isolation. The world is completely different. And now imagine May 9th never came. The red banner never flew over the Reichstag. The Soviet soldier never ended the most terrible war of the 20th century. Imagine that everything went another way, that Germany takes Moscow, that Japan seizes Hawaii and pushes into Australia, that the United States enters the war too late or not at all. In this world, Hitler wins, and the world becomes different, completely different. In this alternative 1945, European capitals are occupied, and London has become the administrative center of the Reich province of Albion. French children learn German at school. Paris is no longer the city of love. It's a logistical hub of Reich highways and barracks. The USSR has fallen. Its remnants are divided among the Reichsgaue, Muscovy, the Caucasus, the Urals. The survivors are slaves and displaced persons. America is isolated. The Atlantic is controlled by the Reich's fleet, the Pacific by Japan. America for Americans is no longer a slogan but enforced isolationism. In this world, the United States has no global voice, no dollar as a world currency, no Hollywood as a factory of narratives. There is only a closed, suspicious, weakened republic. The world divides into two vast poles. The first is Germany, a pan-European empire with its capital in Berlin and an iron apparatus of concentration camps, organs of control, and eugenic selection programs. The second is Japan, an Asian empire stretching from Manchuria to the Persian Gulf. The war between them is postponed, but inevitable. In this world, the 1950s aren't an age of jazz, rock and roll, or technological optimism. They are a decade of dictatorship, systemic control, and sanitized propaganda. On Berlin's streets, giant screens carry the Führer's speeches. Across Tokyo's squares, parades honor an emperor now called a god. People live in fear and grow used to it. In this world, fear is oxygen, abundant, inescapable. Scientific progress doesn't stop here, but it takes another form. Instead of a space race, there is a race for biological superiority. The Reich's genetic laboratories work to create the perfect human. In schools, history begins in 1933. Everything before the era of chaos cannot be mentioned. For that, there is disappearance. That's the official word. Not arrest, but disappearance. The term is evasive, without a trace. Women don't run feminist blogs in this world. Their designated destiny is to give birth. The Lebensborn program is universal. Girls with the right features are raised separately and taught obedience and purity. Boys are drilled in military virtues, close order drill at 10, weapons at 14, the front at 16, even if there is no front anymore, because the enemy is internal. Now, and the enemy is everywhere. Radio pushes a voice into every home, but it isn't music, it's instructions, how to dress, what to eat, what to think. Books not cleared by the Institute for Ideological Security are destroyed. Art exists only within permitted frames. Music is a march, painting is a symbol. Cinema is newsreels. The resistance exists, but it is weak, scattered. In the cities, catacombs still shelter the descendants of communists, liberals, Jews, Poles. They call themselves the Greys. They have no flag, only silence and a belief that someday this will end. But will it? Children no longer know how it was. Their reality is the Reich. Their songs are about victory. Their dreams are service. Born here, you wouldn't know another world, wouldn't want to. You would look at the Stalingrad newsreels as a crime against order, at the world map as terrain not yet cleansed, at human life as a resource. In this alternative 1960s, the rockets are ready, not to fly to the moon, but to annihilate the enemy. Berlin and Tokyo build arsenals. The world prepares for a second war between victors, and humanity, meanwhile, loses the very idea of freedom, because without the defeat of evil, true victory is impossible. And now, knowing all this, think how close we were to such a reality. What if, in one battle, the circumstances had been slightly different? What if one letter arrived too late? One general chose another path. One ally never opened a second front. History is fragile and therefore precious, because every step might have led not to progress, but to a darkness without end. In the early 1970s, the world, split between the German and Japanese empires, enters a Cold War between victors. Both sides realize the next conflict won't be for territory, but for minds, and each begins to act. In Berlin, the Ministry of Historical Consolidation is created to annihilate any mention of defeats, doubts, or alternative versions of the past. The Reich's victory is an axiom, not a question, a slogan from every loudspeaker. Schools adopt a single textbook, a brief chronicle of the world order, starting in 1933. Everything before is mythology, unreliable, dangerous. In Asia, Japan institutes the Taiseikan, an institute of total cultural purification. Chinese, Koreans, Vietnamese are taught Japanese as a first language. All manifestations of national identity are eradicated. Asia's history is rewritten under the banner of the Great East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere. But where there is pressure, cracks appear. In Eastern Europe, underground groups form calling themselves the Rememberers. Their weapons are books, forbidden texts hidden in basements, chapels, abandoned bunkers. There they read Dostoevsky, Shakespeare, Hemingway. They copy recordings by hand. One group circulates Anne Frank's diary, 1 page per person. People memorize it and pass it on. In Japan, a new youth trend arises. Tengaku, literally formless. They refuse the imperial identity, wear old Western clothes, search archives for fragments of pre-war songs, draw forbidden images. They are few, but they are the first fissure in the ice. Scientists do not stand aside. In Latin America, where neutral zones survive, a new discipline appears. Comparative reality. It studies not only what is, but what could have been. Among archives taken to Argentina, they uncover photographs of liberated camps, letters from prisoners, plans for battles that never happened. Those who never knew the Holocaust feel horror for the first time. Meanwhile, strange things occur in the heart of the Reich. In Hamburg, an elderly history teacher with trembling hands and a forgotten name suddenly lectures on the real Napoleon, not the Reich's version that casts him as a mere harbinger of chaos. He speaks of Waterloo, exile, the fall of an empire. He is arrested, but several students manage to record him. The file spreads through universities, forbidden words, but spoken. In that moment, history begins to breathe again. All this leads toward a turning point. Empires built on oblivion fear memory. One day they will face resistance not on a battlefield, but in a story, not through revolt, but through remembrance. And that will be more frightening than any bomb. By the mid-1980s, the hermetic totalitarian world begins to fail. The machine creaks not from outside pressure, but from the weight of its own lies. More and more often, people notice the official version diverges from what they feel. In German cities, a new current appears. The Seekers. This isn't the old underground. It isn't resistance in the classic sense. It is a generation raised inside the Reich that no longer believes in its invincibility. They gather in libraries, attics, rooftops. They read aloud, sometimes just a school syllabus from another country found in an archive, sometimes poetry forbidden for excessive emotionality. They don't fight, they listen. One symbol of this period is a poem found in a scribbled diary of a schoolgirl from Warsaw. It begins. I remember the smell of bread that wasn't there. The line becomes a tattoo, graffiti, a slogan. It doesn't call for action, it calls to remember, and in that call lies a threat to the whole system. Meanwhile, the Japanese Empire faces an internal crisis. In Chinese and Korean regions, sabotage spreads. But these are not acts of violence. They are acts of silence. Workers stop at the same hour and simply stand. They make no demands. The phenomenon becomes known as the hour of emptiness. A month later, it reaches 20 cities. 2 months later, the entire western half of the empire. For the first time in decades, the radio has no explanation. Technologically, both empires are ahead of their time. They have built panopticon cities where every step is recorded, every conversation filtered, every glance captured. From this dense digital mesh arises a new phenomenon, the memory network. It is not the internet. There is no server. It is a chain of human contacts. One person meets another and passes a flash drive, an audio file, a paper note. These materials are decrypted and assembled into nodes, secret repositories. Inside are the voices of the disappeared, footage of real battles, documents from the pre-war world, information that cannot be refuted because it strikes the heart. The memory network has no leaders. It breathes. This terrifies the system. It knows how to fight hierarchies, parties, armies. But here there is nothing to decapitate. Only people who remember. In one node, a word appears for the first time, a word long feared, revision, not a coup, a review, not abolishing the Reich or destroying the empire, but the chance to look from the side, to hear the forbidden, to let in what was erased. The word spreads like seed, and one day, in a city of former France, a banner hangs in the central square. We were not wrong, we were deceived. Thousands see it. They don't manage to tear it down in time. It's clear, thought has returned, and with it, hope. In the early 1990s, the world of the victorious Reich feels like the air before a storm. Outside there is order, inside tension, cracks and unspoken words. The empires still control the externals, transport, food, language, movement, but they are losing the main thing, thoughts. A strange feeling rises everywhere, as if something must happen. People wake at night, listening, though to what? No one knows. In Budapest, an entire shift at a radio station disappears. They don't declare a rebellion, they simply leave. As a farewell, they broadcast as time goes by. No one has heard it on the air for half a century. Listeners freeze. An emotion not described in the manuals runs through the houses, and then silence. That same month in Eastern Germany, an official receives a report on schools and adds a line of his own. The children understand everything, even when they are silent. The note slips into the memory network. It is quoted and memorized. The official disappears, but disappearance is no longer silence. It is a sign. Japanese scientific centers record growing instability among the young. Teenagers refuse the single doctrine exams. Instead, they perform rituals with silence, candles, water. No one taught them this, yet it repeats from city to city. The empire responds with cameras, police, confiscations. But it doesn't understand that it is no longer fighting actions. It is fighting a feeling. Meanwhile, in South America, historians who have amassed the largest archive of the pre-war world release a shadow chronicle, an illicit audio montage mixing real speeches, newsreel fragments, eyewitness voices. It runs 11 minutes. Its format is universal. It spreads as music. One day it plays on Reich radio. By accident or design, no one knows. But once is enough. In Tokyo and Berlin, internal commissions form to forestall panic. They publish guides on how to distinguish truth from falsification, how to report deviations in thinking. The manuals become handbooks for the underground. People mark the words, The regime fears. They make lists, chalk them on walls, leave them in doorways. Freedom, truth, yes. By the end of the decade, the flashes become a movement. In Vienna, Prague, Kiev, night readings gather thousands to read aloud. Not slogans or manifestos, but old letters, poems, pre-war newspapers. This is not a rally. It is memory given a voice. The regime is deaf to it. It doesn't know how to fight a voice that demands nothing, only exists. In this world built on control, the main enemy isn't weapons, but memories. And now they step from the shadows, more often, more loudly, and no camera can drown out their whisper. By the early 2000s, the empires proclaim a phase of high stability. It is an illusion, on the surface, calm, inside, a ticking mechanism. Discrepancies between reality and the official version multiply beyond denial. In the capital of the Reich, the Windows movement appears. Participants hang white sheets in their windows as a symbol of transparency. The regime cannot outlaw fabric, cannot criminalize a gesture, but every house is knocked on, people are taken, replaced, and no one knows where the next sheet will appear. In Japan, young parents refuse the name lists approved by the Imperial Committee, giving their children names that sound like words from forgotten languages: Ina, Leah, Marie. The names aren't registered, yet the children grow and call each other by the names their parents chose. The empire is losing control over the beginning of life. Meanwhile, in neutral states, illicit institutions arise: universities, archives, media. One is the Institute of the Possible, which collects materials on what the world could have been had the main thing not happened. They model alternative 2020 with simulations. No Reich, no empire, but United Nations, space, art, freedom. The videos leak into reality, projected on walls, in underpasses, in reflections. In Germany, a group of mathematicians in Old Munich publishes a paper proving the official chronology violates the logic of time. Dates misalign, events overlap. Déjà vu is not anomaly but system failure. The paper vanishes in a day, but the questions don't. The empires tighten controls, more surveillance, thought passports, loyalty indexes, but the measures spark resistance in unexpected layers. The police, army headquarters, the very developers of the systems. One day, a new frequency goes on air, unsigned, undeclared. A male voice reads a line from a 1939 letter. If you hear this, it means we are still alive. Then music, wordless. The wave cannot be jammed. It is like an echo from the past, or the future. For the first time in decades, the lights go out in Berlin and Tokyo. First a technical error, then a chain reaction. People see neon streets gone dark and, for the first time, stars. No one forbade them, we had simply forgotten. In that starlit hush, something begins that hasn't existed for decades. Silence without fear, a silence in which a morning can be born. The 2020s. A world that seemed motionless begins to sway like a pendulum. The unthinkable becomes possible. Marches of memory course through cities in Europe and Asia. Not protests, movements without slogans. People walk in silence, holding old photographs, letter fragments, tapes of voices. Everyone knows they may be seized, and still they walk. A term appears whose origin no one knows. Unpacking, the return of meaning. People gather to look at old photos, to guess names, to trace lives. It isn't resistance, it is a decryption of the past. At one such gathering, a tape is found. A woman's voice sings a lullaby in a language no one recognizes, and the whole room weeps, because somehow everyone does. The empires lose one of their last pillars, fear. No one runs. People stay. When they come, when they threaten, people look them in the eye. This is no longer heroism. It is the end of fear as an institution. On Tokyo's streets, teenagers chalk a symbol. A circle with 3 dots. No explanation, and everyone understands. A month later it appears in Berlin, then Warsaw, Riga, Kiev. A pulse. Space fills with signs that have no official gloss, but are heavy with meaning. Mass refusal of identification implants begins. People cut them out, refuse scanners, wear cloth bands. The state calls it self-alienation and imposes sanctions. The opposite happens. The people without implants inspire not suspicion but respect. They are the uncoded. One day, on a main screen in Berlin, an unofficial image appears. An old man says, "I was there, I was silent, but now I'm not." The feed is cut after 20 seconds, but it's enough. Thousands record, thousands pass it on. In the most remote places, phrases not printed in decades resurface, sewn into fabric, carved into wood, written in sand. It is as if the earth itself begins to speak, through people, gestures, silence. No regime can drown it now. The 2030s. For the first time in many decades, the same word is heard on both sides of the empires. End. For some it is fear, for some hope, for most uncertainty. In Berlin, self-appointed archivists gather what people have saved: notes, files, photos, audio fragments. They are not interested in politics, but in wholeness. "We're collecting what's left of the world that was hidden," they say. They call themselves the Keepers of Shadows. In Tokyo, a youth movement, the Nameless, releases a series of videos. Faces covered, voices distorted. They read fragments of documents whose very existence the regimes denied. No commentary. People simply listen, holding their breath. Neutral territories announce islands of open history, places where anyone may tell their version of the past, without judgment, without fear. They become centers of pilgrimage. People travel to speak and to hear. A new phrase appears, the common past. It sounds different from official history. It doesn't demand proof, only presence. People no longer argue over what was. They remember, they tell, and weave a new fabric of time. Inside the empires, a mass exodus begins. Engineers, doctors, teachers step away. They don't run, they stop participating. The control machines start to fail. In Munich, facial recognition cameras stop working. The report shows one line: unknown expression. The algorithms can't describe the emotion because it's no longer fear or submission, but something new or very old. Among the ruins of old Königsberg, teenagers find an abandoned print shop and publish the first independent newspaper in 3 languages: German, Polish, Russian. Its name is As Long as We Speak. It spreads by train, bicycle, voice. The world holds its breath. For the first time in almost a century, not just protest arises, but an alternative, not a life against, but a life in spite of. This is not an ending. It is another timeline surfacing, the one that was hidden, and it has come back into the light. The 2040s. The world stops being divided by the old concept. The empire as structure still exists, but it has lost its essence. It no longer protects itself with force. It holds by habit. And habit, like myth, disappears if you stop repeating it. In the capital of the Reich, there are no more parades, only empty boulevards. People go out not for marches but for walks. No slogans, no flags. They simply walk together. It is called renewed silence. In that silence, there is more meaning than in dozens of speeches. In Frankfurt, a former media functionary publishes notes confessing how broadcasts, interviews, cultural stories were falsified. No scandal follows, rather relief, an overdue confession. In Tokyo, on the site of the former surveillance center, a garden is planted. No cameras, no networks, no antennas, just a garden, a place where you can be. People bring old objects, books, toys, photographs. Nothing is archived. Everything is here and now. Along the Atlantic coast, in empty lighthouses, a project begins. Light letters. Anyone can send a text that will be turned into light. Signals sweep the horizon, flash in fog, climb the sky. They cannot be intercepted because their purpose is not to convince, but to exist. White spaces spread on the map, territories that refuse the old coordinates. They recognize neither empires nor borders. People live by an inner law. Listen, remember, speak. They are the quiet lands. An anonymous former functionary, now a teacher, writes, "We built everything but meaning." Students search for meaning, and perhaps one day will build something not about power, but the human. In the center of Berlin, a screen that once broadcast commands suddenly shows an old painting, a field without text or explanation, wind on the speakers. Thousands stand and watch in silence. For the first time in a long time, there's no need to speak. It is enough to be. The 2050s. The empires do not fall, they dissolve. They disappear not in catastrophe, but in quiet. They are not overthrown. People stop repeating them. Belief ebbs, and that is enough. Borders soften like fog. Trains run without checks. People move freely. Flags vanish from buildings, replaced by symbols invented by communities. Slogans give way to patterns, colors, traces. Visual speech replaces political speech. In Old Königsberg, night dialogues take place, gatherings without topic or agenda. People sit in a circle and listen. Someone talks, not necessarily loudly. Someone simply watches for hours. A new power emerges, the power of attention. In the former Central Library of the Reich, an exhibition opens, Unwritten History. There are no texts, only objects. Each is a witness, no labels, no context. Their task is to remind us that history is not always written with letters. One object is a box of faded handkerchiefs. No one knows whose they were, but the room is rarely without someone in tears. The fabric remembers. In Asia, the young host silent rhythms, parties without sound. People dance in silence, guided by one another's movement, a unity that needs no signal from above. Those who once wore uniforms now wear gray shirts, not as uniform, but as a sign that the structure has dissolved and the human is a person again. In one of the last documents of the empire, found in an archive, there is only one line. "We didn't notice when everything changed." The sentence is now engraved on a stone where the government quarter once stood. Everyone who reads it understands. Silence won. Not the silence that suppresses, the one that frees. The 2060s. This is no longer a world after empire, but a world after consequences. People do not build a new state. They learn to be, not to govern or persuade or conquer, simply to be present. Across the world, places of meaning appear, not temples, not monuments. Rooms, fields, stairwells where something important once happened. There are no signs, yet people come, sometimes just to sit. In Athens, a former historian gives open-air lectures about a time that never was, events that might have been. People call it counter-memory because even an imagined history can heal. In Siberia, where a camp archive once stood, a mirrored tower rises. There is no entrance. It reflects everything around except itself. Its creator says, "We cannot change the past, but we can refuse to repeat its form." On the world's digital map, a web of forgotten things takes shape, a living network of places, people, phrases, sounds. Anyone may add a node. It is not a database, it is alive. Each node is an act of memory. The generation born after the empires scarcely knows what it is to fear a word. They speak mixed languages. They don't ask, "What's your surname?" but "What do you remember?" or "What would you like to remember?" A boy finds a broken projector in the ruins of a military factory, repairs it, and shows pre-war cartoons on a wall. Children laugh. The laughter isn't only about the present, it brings the past to life. More and more often a question appears. If history had gone differently, Who would you have become? It is no longer fear. It is freedom, the freedom to imagine and therefore to be alive. The 2070s, people no longer celebrate anniversaries of wars. They mark the dates of peace, the day someone did not shoot, the hour one family sheltered another. Milestones of silence. In New Zealand, a school without history opens. They teach no chronology. Students listen to voice recordings. Every day, a new voice without context or name. Just a person speaking of something important. Students decide for themselves what it teaches. In Berlin, a gallery of decisions opens, a space collecting moments of choice. Not feats, not crimes, but nuances, a look, a gesture, a word left unsaid. Visitors do not merely view the exhibit, they enter moments through scent and warmth, through VR, not as spectacle, but as empathy. Across Russia, circles of meaning form, small communities that meet in the evenings to discuss what matters to them. There is no agenda, no decree, only the desire to be understood. There is no single truth in these conversations, but there is trust. The generation of 2007 rarely uses surnames. Names have become personal. Identity is fluid. Bonds are formed not by blood, but by nearness of memory. On the site of a former Alpine bunker, an observatory of the present opens. It doesn't watch the sky. Its telescopes turn toward cities, people, faces, not to spy, but to see. Random moments of life are recorded, without judgment or edit, simply as existence. More and more often one hears, history is not what was, but what we let remain. The main thing is no longer what happened, but what we allow to stay with us. The 2080s. There are no countries in the old sense, but spaces, physical and semantic. They intersect and drift. They aren't registered or guarded. They are recognized by the intonation of a greeting, by the way people are silent. In the former Security Council chamber, a repository of unused words operates, words no one ever uttered. They aren't invented, they are remembered. Each word bears a soundtrack, a breath, a pause, an intention, a library of silence. In the Andes, a memorial to the unknown listener is raised. It has no name, no dates, only a hollow outline one can stand within. People come and stand to listen to the world, to themselves, to others. Young directors shoot films without actors. Streets act and rain and open windows. There is no plot, only the movement of time. The viewer is not an observer, but a participant. History is no longer a story, it is presence. Children are taught silence as an art. There are no correct answers. They are taught to hear the question and to answer, if needed, without words. In 2089, a group of philosophers formulates an idea called soft knowledge. Knowledge that doesn't fight or prove. It lives alongside you and remains even if you don't accept it. When one of the last people born before the empire's dissolution passes away, a note is found in his home. I did not live to see the end, but I lived to see the beginning. The phrase becomes a title. Films, exhibitions, books, roots, all bear its trace. Because the point is no longer who won, but who remained human. And on the Baltic shore, where once a port flew someone's flag, a child draws a circle with 3 dots in the sand, a symbol that no longer needs a key. It simply is.